Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Rabbi Pankin, for inviting me to join your community this evening in your celebration of Pride Shabbat. It's an honor to share with you a few words of Torah in celebration tonight. My name is Melanie Levav. I was ordained by the Jewish Theological Seminary in 2018. I'm a second career rabbi. I went back to school nearing the age of 40 with a keen interest in helping more people in the Jewish community to talk more openly, more often, more comfortably about death and dying, in order to live lives of greater meaning and connection. And now I have the privilege of serving as the founding director of a brand new startup organization called the Shomer Collective. Shomer is focused on improving end-of-life experiences grounded in Jewish wisdom. The word Shomer, as some of you may know, means guard in Hebrew, and is both the name of the person who serves as the security guard at the entrance to a building and the person or people who traditionally sit with the body of a Jewish person from the time of death until burial, accompanying the soul as it begins its journey of separation from the body. The work of Shomer Collective is meant to evoke that image of accompaniment as we seek to accompany people on their journey to explore how to live well in the face of mortality. But that's not what I've come to speak about tonight, really. Tonight, Rabbi Pankin asked me to consider the idea of being an ally as it relates to this being Pride Month and tonight being Pride Shabbat. Well, I came out as a lesbian 27 years ago at the age of 20 and have been married to my wife for more than 20 years, my wife who was a college housemate of Rabbi Pankin. Before this invitation, I'm not sure that I'd thought of myself in the role of ally in the way I understand straight folks to be allies to the queer community. I'm intimately familiar with the experience of being a member of the queer community and with the experience of growing up in a Jewish community that hadn't yet come around to recognizing the need for full equality of women and queer folks. But I sat with this idea of allyship for a bit and quickly realized that much of my experience during this pandemic has been one of learning to be an ally. You see, our younger child came out as transgender last summer. In a text message, sitting in the next room, in the dark, alone and scared. And the journey we've been on as a family this year, pandemic and all, has been a sacred journey as we learn how to support Ami in being fully who he is, moving beyond his having been assigned female at birth into the privilege and challenges of being queer. According to Webster's dictionary, the word ally, used as a noun, is defined as one who is associated with another as a helper, a person or group that provides assistance and support in an ongoing effort, activity, or struggle, as in a political ally. Webster.com adds, the noun ally is now often used specifically for a person who is not a member of a marginalized or mistreated group, but who expresses or gives support to that group. And so while I identify as a member of the LGBTQ community, I'm not transgender, but I have worked diligently, not without missteps, to figure out how to be an ally to my child, who's a member of an even more marginalized subgroup within the larger category of queer community. Sure, I have friends who are transgender, but as I imagine some of you know from experience, when it's a member of your own family, your own child even, it can feel like a different story altogether. And yet we in the Jewish community know what it means to be marginalized, to be a member of a subgroup within larger categories. We've attempted to be allies in others' struggles and seek allies in our own struggles. I wonder who we might think of when we think of our allies in the recent resurgence of anti-Semitism in this country, for example. I know Rabbi Pankin has forged strong connections with other faith leaders in your area, and it's often other people of faith who step up as allies, who step up to express and give support when our Jewish community is mistreated or marginalized or hurt. So what of the role of the ally in relation to the marginalized LGBTQ community? Who steps up, and what does it look like to give support when folks who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer are targets for hate? How could it be that just a few decades ago, our own liberal religious movements were still debating the humanity and equality of those who love differently than what was then understood to be the norm? What did it take to get us to where we are today? A place where our kids can come out even before they reach the age of B'nai Mitzvah, where two-mom families aren't such a strange thing to see on the class list from school. When I find myself overwhelmed by big questions like this, or unmoored in a time of uncertainty, I often turn to the Jewish calendar to help ground me in the present moment. And on our calendar this week, we read the Torah portion called Korach. The idea of reading the same stories over and over again brings me comfort. For while the story may be the same, I am most certainly not the same each year, and thus I can read in the stories a new way of understanding as I seek ways to apply the meaning of the stories to my own life. And so this year, I read Korach with a new lens, literally, as I'm now the proud owner of my first pair of bifocals, and I'm now the parent of a queer kid. Korach, the Torah tells us, rose up with a bunch of his own allies to question the leadership of Moses and Aaron. They said to Moses and Aaron, "You've gone too far. Everyone in this community is holy, and God dwells among them. Why then do you raise yourselves above everyone else, above all the rest of us who are part of the community of God?" And how do you think Moses responds? Not immediately in defense, not immediately in words. The very next verse in the story tells us, "Vayishma Moshe vayipol al panav." When Moses heard this, he fell on his face. Picture that. The leader of the community being confronted by a subgroup, questioning his role. And Moses' first reaction? He falls on his face. Now, some commentators suggest that it's as if his face fell, not that he actually fell onto his face. But it's clear that Moses pauses in reaction to having his position of power questioned, and that pause is one that demonstrates his ability to align himself in a way with the questioners before he responds to them. Other commentators suggest that as soon as Korach accused Moses of setting himself above everyone else, Moses reacted with his body language to humble himself, to try to equalize the situation temporarily, in an effort to say, "Hey, I'm one of you too, even if it happens that God chose me to be a leader after my protests and lack of confidence." It was only after this pause, this attempt to express himself through his body, that Moses responded in words, saying that God would be the one to directly respond to the inquiry. Is it possible, really, that Moses' reaction to Korach was one of empathy, of understanding, of an attempt to show that even though they were different, there were, in fact, ways in which Moses could understand the plight of the ones who were not chosen to be the leaders? I'd like to read it this way, through my new lens as an ally this year, to recognize that while I, a queer person who's lived out loud and proud for more than 2 decades, can do my darndest to show my child that I am their ally, that there is something in my experience that allows me to recognize and support their experience, even if our experiences are different. "No," I said to Ami. "I never had the experience of losing friends when I came out," as Ami asked me one night. But yes, I did have the experience of choosing to move away from friendships that no longer felt supportive once I came out, and that too was painful. It's this experience of stopping to pause, of dropping our faces, as it were, that allows us to get in touch with our own feelings and experiences, different as they may be, in order to step back up into our positions of privilege, positions we may not have intentionally chosen, and to use them in the service of a greater purpose. So, my friend, Rabbi Penkin, I offer you my thanks for inviting me to reflect on this idea of being an ally and encouraging me to do it in the context of teaching a few words of Torah, as it allowed me to recognize that one quick line of Moses' body language was saying so much more than words might, and how we can pause to get in touch with our own feelings and experiences as we seek to be the best allies we can be, even as we recognize our differences. This year, as we read of an increasing number of states attempting to pass laws against vital health care for trans youth, as we read of the ways in which trans youth athletes are being subjected to the diminishment of their humanity in a quest for fairness, I invite you to join me in taking that pause, as our leader Moses did, to get in touch with your own feelings and experiences of being called out, of being othered, of feeling different in some way, and to use those feelings and experiences to motivate us to reach out in new ways with our body language as it becomes safer to be in closer proximity to one another, and with our words to demonstrate our recognition of the humanity and equality of those who may be different from us, and to stand with them, to use our privilege to lift them up. Shabbat Shalom.